What's Next. Before I get into the details of this week's episode, I would like to point out that I can now be found on Instagram and TikTok at What's Next with Lacey. So if you want some content outside of the pod, if you just can't get enough of me, then please follow me there. Also, please subscribe and share this podcast. If you've come across an episode with a career that you think a friend might be interested in, send it along to them. I would be much appreciative. Anyway, this week I am talking to my very good friend Vinay, who is a software engineer at a large tech company. This episode I found so much fun because I feel like I went into it with very little knowledge about what exactly a software engineer does and have come out with a whole new appreciation of the field. Vinay expertly describes what exactly a software engineer is, what his day-to-day looks like, what types of projects he works on, and of course gives us some advice for how to get into this field. I will say that I want to apologize in advance for the very little technical knowledge that I have. And so for those of you who are a little bit more educated on this field than I am, forgive the dumb questions from me about all the specific technical jargon, but I still hope that everyone can learn something from Vinay and enjoy it as much as I did.
So we're live.
We're live. Are you ready?
Not really, but we'll see how this goes.
Why don't you start by telling us exactly what you do now, what your role is now?
Yeah. So I am a software engineer. I've been a software engineer for 4 years since graduating. And what do? I build systems. What I'm doing on a daily basis is I'm both coding and I'm also designing how components work together to fulfill a particular product. At my company, I used to work for a team that was working on building tools for multimedia, on how you can get video and images out to different areas on our core product. So how can you get things out to the web? How can you get things distributed on different parts of our platform? And then my new team is, how do I develop systems for other engineering teams to actually develop AI tools and technologies for the greater products that we work with?
That is very, very cool. I want to roll it back a bit. Firstly, what exactly is a software engineer? You said you were both coding and designing. Is that specific to your role? Like, how would you overarchingly explain what a software engineer is?
So a software engineer really means everything that you see on the internet, to your phone, to the products that you're probably using on a daily basis, Spotify, maybe listening to this, are developed by software engineers. And what that means is I have to store data securely somewhere. I have to access that data securely. I have to access that quickly. I have to use systems and protocols that allow me to do that. And how do you access that from the user interface all the way down to where that data is stored is what a software engineer's responsibility is. So as you can tell, there's quite a wide variety of what a software engineer could be doing.
Right.
And that's what makes it both exciting to me and also exceedingly difficult sometimes to navigate, is to what am I actually good at within software engineering? What am I actually interested in working on?
Right. I mean, it is indeed a massive field in and of itself. So then specifically to you, what languages, because that's what you mostly work in, right? These like languages, these coding languages.
Well, honestly, I would say it's not the language that makes the software necessarily.
Interesting.
Languages are sometimes a decision that you make based on what your company is using already or what you're most familiar with. But a lot of languages can do similar things, but you may pick a particular language for performance reasons or because it's easy and faster to deploy. And so really where the decisions that you're making or what you're doing is using the language. You have a problem in front of you. How do I get this data inside how do I show this data to my user?
Got it.
Right?
So as a software engineer, how do you know everything? Are you supposed to know every language?
No, you're not. I mean, that's where the internet's a treasure trove of information. And there's a lot of, I think, software almost builds itself on this open source community of, hey, I want to build in this language. Can I ask a question in this forum, in that forum? We're using Python, C++, and people face the same problems all over the place. So depending on what environment you want to work in, you can choose what is best for you.
Got it.
And part of the responsibilities of being a software engineer is to be able to problem solve or take those fundamentals that you may have learned in school,
right,
and know how to solve small problems to
got it
bigger scale.
So then let's go back specifically to your job now. What does a day look like for you? You said you were both coding and designing. So are you spending most of your days doing that? Like, are you still having meetings? Like, what does a day look like for you?
Yeah. So a day as a software engineer is, I would say, I think one of the best lessons that I learned from someone was 80% of your time at least should be dedicated to planning out how you're going to do something. And if you do that, you're going to do it well. The 20% of the time will kind of come easily. You'll foresee all the problems, and then you can focus on all the small things that you overlooked. So in the morning, kind of really it's about how do we have stand-up? So we have a stand-up in the morning that really means kind of sync across our whole team. And the team is responsible for sharing what they did the day before, and where they need help or where they can help make connections on what they're individually working on. Everyone's working on one component of kind of a larger thing that your team is purposed for or directed towards. And putting that all together, you have that meeting, I know what I need to do today.
Right.
And you go at it, and you'll have a few ad hoc meetings here and there, getting people's perspectives on, okay, how should we go about this? Or this is my idea or plan of attack for this particular task. Is that appropriate? And some other more longer term visions of, if we were to incorporate this tool in this product, this is how it would fit.
How many people are usually on these teams? Does it depend on what the project is that you're working on?
So it depends on the product. I would say, in my experience, the teams have they've grown as products got more funding or they were more successful. But generally, a successful team is anywhere from, can be of any size, really. And once you get to this critical size, I would say around maybe 10 people, you want to think about how you can make sure that people feel like there's a clear direction with your team. Because after a certain point, you will still work with all these 10 people, but you want to have a clear, defined mission of what you want to do.
So you're all working towards this common goal, I guess, like project, right? Is it a really collaborative job, or are you kind of working on your own separate part individually? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, I would say it's extremely collaborative. I mean, I think the nature of software engineering is that your task cannot exist in a vacuum.
Right.
And you have to be cognizant of what the big picture is. So if you're, for example, working on, I guess what I'm currently building, right, is you're trying to integrate different tools into a machine learning pipeline. You have to know how the other tools that you're working with are going to respond when you make those changes. But that's not to say that you need to know the deep, intricate details of those systems, but you should know how they work, to the degree of, if I make this assumption, is that assumption going to break something that someone else has made? Or does this actually fit into what that platform's long-term strategy is?
Right. So then what happens if you build something that then that works for your part of your project, but then doesn't work within the larger puzzle?
Yeah, that happens a lot. So you can't, I think with software engineering, you can't foresee everything. And the landscape and domains change, product visions change. And sometimes you have to say, okay, maybe we did not design this the best way possible. And you look back and you say, okay, these are the components that we now have. They've been built for so long that we need to adapt on top of that. Right. But you always want to work towards, okay, if I were to start over, how would I have done it differently? And that's where you see, okay, maybe we can start working towards that incrementally, and solve one problem without breaking everything else.
How long do you then, with all these like intricate bits, how long do you spend on a project? Usually. I mean, I can imagine it honestly varies.
So I would say a good project is scoped so that you can complete it within a month.
Oh.
So, but that one project may contribute to a larger initiative.
Right.
Right. So if, for example, I'm trying to be able to search across all of my content more efficiently. That might be your broad initiative. But a small project might just be, I want to include this data item in order to make that field accessible in my search engine. Those things are a lot smaller scale and quite clearly contribute to that larger goal. And I think that's the puzzle building in software engineering is, do you have a vision of what that end goal is going to be and how each component is going to contribute to that? There are just a lot of different building blocks that you want to have, and you can do them in isolation, and then you can also just see the end product.
So how do you manage that? How do you manage you've done all this work, you put it all together, and then it doesn't work. And then you have to go back. Can't you just like wanting to throw your computer against the wall?
Yeah, so I want to throw my computer against the wall about once a day.
Yikes.
But in like a good way. It's more, oh my gosh, I need to take a step back.
Right.
But again, everything is scoped in such small quantities.
Right.
That you're going to generally be in a position where after a month of work, you're not looking at it and saying, holy crap, I have to start all over.
Yeah.
You're looking at, okay, I've done this small thing that contributes even to that 1 month project.
Yeah.
And I've realized that breaks a lot of assumptions. So we can reevaluate if that 1 month goal is even feasible or if we have to change our strategy.
Got it. That makes a lot more sense. So on that note then, how do you control your hours? How do you go, okay, this is the end of the day. Like you may still have work to do, but it feels like software engineering, it can just keep going and going and going and going.
Yeah, I think software engineering actually has, I don't know if it's unique to software engineering, but the product management strategies and the project management strategies are quite clever in the way that you try and plan quarters or you try and plan sprints, which is essentially for us about a 2-week period where we try and have these sprint objectives that are almost mini goals towards these larger projects and initiatives. And within that, you have, and this is known as kind of this agile methodology that you can change on a dime, you can adapt to different things. And working with a team, everyone is accountable to that. And so you take a project, someone, maybe a project lead, a tech lead, will break that down into small components, these individual tasks, add a data item to a database, or create a code function that will support data loading for you. Those are small items. And as a team, you'll look at it and say, okay, reasonably, this will take 1 to 2 days, or maybe this is huge and this will take 5 days or something like that. And then someone goes and really tries to tackle it. They're primarily responsible for it, but it doesn't mean that they're doing it alone. And that's how you kind of keep on track of what you're doing.
Got it. How long do you spend at the office?
Yeah, I would say I work around 8:30 to 6ish.
Oh, that's not bad.
So really, I think I have a good balance. I think I do work at a larger tech company, and I think that is something that from myself, my own experience and my friends' experiences at other companies, larger tech companies tend to afford a little bit more work-life balance.
But how? Like everyone always says that, right? About tech companies, that they have this great work-life balance, but you're still working on these incredibly large projects and the work needs to get done and you still have your deadlines, I'm sure. But like, so what's the difference between what you're doing and like bankers, whatever, or investment bankers who are working all these late hours?
Well, I think in tech, you do have this whole support system of people within your company. I mean, look what I'm doing now. I'm building tools for other engineers to use.
Right.
And I think having the support of tools built in within the company shaves off a lot of hours from what is needed. And the expectations from people are, if you enjoy your job, you're going to do better.
Yeah.
And I think that's the mentality of the tech industry is, yes, there's going to be urgency on making sure that you're out to product first.
Right.
But with the teams that you do have, there's still the urgency and the product impact. But because they can, I guess, fundamentally afford more people.
Right. So they just staff it up to where they have the people that they need. And funnily enough, that actually makes a difference into the ultimate work product. That's genius.
That's what I would assume, but it would be nice to see that for every company if that is the case.
Well, exactly. And that is amazing then that all these tech companies can be doing this massive amount of work that is so integral to our functioning of society. And yet the people who work for these companies have a good work-life balance. What is something that you've done in your current role, in your current role that you're really proud of? Like, what's your button on a page that you've managed to build?
I think more than button on the page, I think what I'm most proud of is solving problems at 2 a.m. There is something exciting about getting a phone call when you're asleep. It sounds terrible, I think. But you should have seen Lacey's face. Lacey just looked at me like, we just talked about work-life
Exactly.
balance.
That's what I was literally thinking. What?
And then I was so happy when my work-life balance was ruined.
Yeah, exactly.
I think there's something about solving a problem that you thought you had foreseen, or a problem that you didn't foresee, and having to fix that issue in a hurry.
Yeah.
There is something about, okay, we have an outage. Our alarms are going off within our systems. We set it up so that we're alerted when there could be a potential problem upcoming. And you have to also build your systems that way, as to, okay, for the most part, it'll work, but there are chances that it doesn't. So how do we make sure that we're notified when it doesn't?
Does that happen often?
Not often. Not if you're building a good system.
Right.
But
it does happen.
It does happen to...
So are you saying you like release a product, or you finish a product that could have something go wrong?
Well, I think software is such a space that you can try and foresee every edge case.
Right.
Right. But you may not always foresee some problems that arise in like, maybe your traffic is suddenly more than you can consume, and now some of your consumers are not able to get their data on time. How do you solve that? Or maybe you're in a situation that you're supporting systems that you didn't know you supported.
Yeah. So do you ever feel like you're really done with a project then?
You own the responsibility of that product once you're done with the project. So you're constantly accumulating more product, more software. And what you hope you're not accumulating is more technical debt, which is what we call our tech debt. And sometimes you have to really invest in your tech debt.
What is tech debt?
So it's when you may not have tests that cover all your use cases. It's when you don't feel you have the alarms to sufficiently debug a problem if there might be a problem. And how do you actually build out that system? That is what software engineering is you're both protecting against the future and you're building products that will serve the future.
So essentially what you're saying is that you are completing these projects, but you may have to return to a project if something has gone wrong, but you hope that in completing the project that won't be the case, that you have to return.
Yeah. I mean, how many times has an app on your phone crashed?
Yeah.
So when that happens, hopefully that app, or for us, our software gives us a notification saying, oh my gosh, Lacey's app crashed, and tells us, hey, there's a problem here. We have to go and address it to make sure that that can't happen again. Got
it. So this is what you're saying you're most proud of. Is that like, are you saying once one of your completed projects there's been a problem, or?
Something that I think our team owned, or something that I did work on in the past, was ended up breaking to an extent that I had to be woken up, like it needed urgent remediation. And it was
it's kind of like a doctor.
And it was a team of people, because I wasn't alone, right? It was teams from, okay, who did this impact? Which systems are involved, and how can we get to the bottom of how we can solve these issues? And different companies have a varied amount of issues, and depending on your company and what you need to prioritize, you can be more quote unquote fault tolerant. Like, I think there's a difference between my YouTube feed cut out and I can't make this decision on a marketplace or something like that.
Right. Wow. So then do you have to have your phone on you all the time?
No. So we actually have this on-call system, and where, if there's an outage, call this person.
Interesting. But what if they're not familiar with the software?
That, I think, is the responsibility of a good team, is that you have shared responsibility, and the on-call person is really the person that's supposed to be woken up first. Sometimes you're woken up because one of your services, you may be down on your service capacity, even though you know that you can handle the load. That person can solve that problem by helping to bring up the service again.
Got it. So, but when it is that like 2 a.m. call, you don't need to go into the office, right?
No, not unless I leave my laptop there. That would be a problem. So, I mean, there was a time, I think when I started, everyone had their own laptops that they took home, and there was already a kind of one day at home type flexibility, I guess.
Pre-COVID,
it wasn't. I think we're definitely very much in person culture. I think that kind of collaboration is fostered there, but the work from home mentality with tech is sometimes you just need your deep workspace. You don't need to be talking to people or working across from someone. But so you needed laptops at home, but there was a time that laptops may not be as secure, or can we trust that? And that's when everyone had to go to the office. And so people used to get calls. I think this was way before my time, but they would have to go in
at 2 a.m. and have to fix the problem.
Yeah.
That is wild. I want to now go back and hear more about your journey to what we have just discussed. Did you know how to code before you got to college?
So I did. I knew how to code to a degree, but knowing how to code and knowing how to be a software engineer, I think, are very different. I think going to school, I took AP Computer Science, which, all things considered, I'm not sure how much I took away personally, but it was good fundamentals from these are some foundational problems that you should deal with in computer science. This is how, what is a loop? Like, how do you think about doing things over and over again? How do you think about conditional statements? If I do this, then I'll do that.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the fundamentals there. And how do you start structuring things? But then I didn't really have any background beyond that. It was just, I knew how to code a few things. I knew how to think. I created some weird puzzle where you could guess a word of famous quotes. I was obsessed with like Lord of the Rings quotes. And so we created a chatbot, if you will, about a guessing game, kind of like Hangman type.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That was like your project in this comp sci class?
Yeah, that was me, little 10th or 11th grader, learning to code and put things together.
But you said that coding is different from being a software engineer. Knowing how to code is different. Why do you say that?
Well, I think learning how to code, you don't necessarily learn how to store data. When I learned how to code, I said, throw everything into my list or memory that I have on my computer. But sometimes you need to permanently store those files or be able to access them on demand or remotely.
Right.
So that's stuff that you don't learn by just learning how to code. You have to learn how to interact with different services or applications or libraries that help you do those things.
This is a really dumb question. Where are these libraries and servers and services and other words you just said?
Yeah, software engineering is ridiculous. There's jargon that will throw it at you and do all these things. And that's where the industry changes so much, is what are these libraries and how are they being supported? For example, there are some major libraries in the machine learning world, like PyTorch, TensorFlow, you may have heard of or maybe not.
No.
Really, they're frameworks for building training pipelines that, okay, there are some traditional tasks. I need to load data and I need to create a system that does train.
Okay.
And so train is a common function or something like that. So how do you make it so that you've set up a system that creates it so that that's reproducible across different platforms?
Interesting. Going off topic slightly here, how do you stay on top of all these advancements? Is there ever going to be a time where you and your knowledge is like too far gone and that like you can no longer be a software engineer?
Well, I think that's your responsibility as a software engineer. So at one point, I had to really stay on top of what are some multimedia protocols for helping to stream data. Like, what are you using to stream Spotify? How are you doing that based on your internet connection? Those help inform your technical decisions.
Right.
Now I have to be a little bit more aware of how are the frameworks changing that are supporting some of these quote unquote deep learning algorithms. And how do you make sure that you're using the best libraries that are compatible with the best hardware? And those are fundamental challenges.
Right.
And so it's a matter of keeping your tabs on things that are published. There's like Hacker News, TechCrunch, different resources. There's the information. It's a news source that you can, I guess, pay for. I don't subscribe to a lot of these things, but
you use them to keep tabs and stuff, and that's kind of something that you're doing. Obviously, you have part of that as your job responsibility, but outside of work, you're also staying up to date with what's happened.
Yeah, and people talk, right?
Right.
A lot of people in the software industry are also passionate about software.
Right.
And so they'll talk about, hey, there's this new technology or this new framework that we're building our system in. Within our company, I mean, there's so many different pieces of software that you can learn from other colleagues as to this is how we're using Kubernetes, which is a whole distributed application framework.
Right.
Or this is how we are sending messages or streaming messages across to different platforms all at once.
Okay. That seems smart, but also kind of intense, and seems like if you don't keep up with all this, you could be out of a job.
Not necessarily, because you also have to, you can't use new things for the sake of using new things. Just because it's nice and shiny doesn't mean it's the best tool for your application. It's just another tool that you should probably add to your toolkit, but it doesn't mean that it should always be used. Just because it's faster on this one thing doesn't mean that it provides a nice interface to actually interact with.
Got it. That makes sense. So you went into college. We both went to Columbia, did very different things. My one comp sci class you helped me with, I was very bad at. Why did you went to Columbia Engineering?
Right.
Why did you decide to go to Columbia Engineering versus Columbia College? Because Columbia College also had comp sci. Yeah.
So I think I didn't know I wanted to be a computer scientist or a software engineer going into school. I knew I wanted to do something related to computers to a degree. But I actually went in, okay, maybe computer engineering is interesting. I built me and three high school friends. I think one of my favorite memories in senior year of high school, we built a computer, which really, we didn't really build a computer. We took parts and we hooked them up together in a box. And
still,
that was building a quote unquote building a computer. But there was a lot of cool components to that. We learned we were all kind of passionate about computers and how they work together and how different networks worked more quickly. So I knew I wanted to do something, but I wasn't sure what area I wanted to specialize in.
Okay.
And I think the framework that Columbia had was, here, try out different engineering disciplines and figure out what you like.
Yeah.
And so I took there's a whole swath of curriculum that you have to take as part of your core engineering requirements, and learned a little bit of chemistry if I was interested in that. And then economics was a requirement for us as well. Looking at CS as a discipline that actually affects everything today. So people are using computer science to run data modeling experiments in pretty much all engineering fields. So that was kind of what brought me a little bit more to the engineering. Was I wanted to be less on the theory side and a little bit more on the applications. And,
got it.
How things integrated.
So then you did do internships in your summers at Columbia.
I did.
How did you find those internships?
So my first summer, I was doing both. I can't remember. I was doing a research project with a professor. And that was between, I think, freshman year and sophomore year. And it was an interesting project that was at the intersection of computer science and chemical engineering.
Oh, cool.
So that was really cool. That was something that I worked on at that time. And then my sophomore year, I interned, funnily enough, at the company that I am at now, and interned in New York. And that was my first real, I would say, foray into what software engineering is. And I think those internships are structured so that you're building kind of an isolated product. So if you're bad at it, you're not affecting the rest of the team. But if you're good at it, you do feel like you're making an impact and you're doing something valuable. And internships are a great opportunity for, I think, companies to experiment with some really cool technologies.
Yeah.
And for you as an intern to be very excited about those technologies. And so I really loved my internship experience, got to know the company a lot, got to know what it really meant to be a software engineer. It's not just because school, you're building a project and you're done.
Yeah.
Right. That's where there's no tech debt. It's like, I don't care how good my code quality is. I just try and solve this problem.
Do you think you needed certain knowledge before going into this internship?
So yes and no. Yes, you should know the basics of how to code per se.
Yeah.
And you should know how to solve problems at a high level. That's it. You need to be a problem solver, and you need to know your
basic languages. Because ultimately, syntax is something that you can kind of learn or you can Google. Right.
But how you use that syntax is very challenging.
Did you do the same internship your junior summer?
So I interned at the same company, but I wanted to experience a different lay of the land. So I actually went to San Francisco. And San Francisco was, I loved it. So I ended up joining back at the company in San Francisco. And for me, I think the biggest difference was Columbia. I experienced New York to a degree.
Yeah.
And I was ready for change. I was ready to check out something new and explore a whole new coast and place. And
do you think also what part of the attraction was being surrounded by all these people who were in a similar industry to you?
Yes, in the sense there was a lot of noise that naturally you pick up.
Yeah.
You get to hear the hype as the hype is building.
Yeah.
What I didn't like necessarily was everyone was in the same industry. And so you don't get necessarily the same diverse job experiences that you do in New York.
You're now with the same company and you have been for the past 4 years. Where did you start? And did you get promoted to get to where you are now?
Yeah, so software engineering is actually really interesting that way. And I think my company in particular is, I think we pride ourselves on not having direct career progression targets. You're not trying to say, hey, after 2 years, I'm going to be promoted. What does promoted actually mean? Is that just more money? Is that something else? And I think software engineering is definitely a discipline where you can specialize in different areas. And so for me, I started as a software engineer. And I was a full stack software engineer, which really means I did some UI development, so the user interfaces that you interact with, the buttons that our users were pushing. And I was also a backend engineer, which meant how do I store the data that someone inputs on that screen, and how do I serve that then to the front end?
Wow.
And how do systems integrate between each other? So that was kind of my core responsibility, and I was learning how to do that across the team. And after about 2.5 years, there was, I think what I excelled in was learning how our product integrated into that big picture. And also was given the opportunity to work with a lot of other people. And I enjoy working with others and helping others solve problems that are related to software. And I have some great mentors at the company that helped me become a team lead at the company for the team that was growing that I started with.
Yeah. And
that was a great experience, both growing through that and also learning how do you help grow individuals within a software company.
Yeah.
And I think that's what really broadened my horizons to a software engineer is not just a full stack engineer, for example. It could be someone that is an expert in UI development or an expert in a specific technology, or someone that can see the whole system and architect the whole system. And those are all different areas of software engineering where you also don't need to be managing people to do, but you need to be able to work with others. And this domain experience, this product experience, and these technical expertise are all facets where someone can be quote unquote promoted in software engineering.
Got it. With this kind of lack of specific structure, how do you suggest people do show their strengths as a software engineer?
It's really hard. And I think that's what's challenging about the discipline is sometimes people do want those stepping ladders as to, yeah, after 2 years, if you do XYZ, you finish 20 story points per sprint or something, then you can move on to the next phase.
Yeah.
And having those concrete goals are sometimes very useful. But I think the challenge is it is so diverse in the field that you have to be willing to make inner source contributions to the company. Like, hey, this system has broken for us. Rather than trying to do a Band-Aid on my system, I'm going to create a reusable component that can be used by everyone in the company. And so that's how they showcase that, hey, they know how to think about building things in a modular format.
Right.
That's good technical design.
Right.
And then people that are more interested in product aspects, you want to see that they're thinking about how their system can be used more as, again, this component, or how it can integrate into new areas that are also developing something similar. So rather than them building out something else, you're working together on integrating your two platforms.
Yeah. It kind of feels to me a bit like school in a way, in that you are A, constantly learning, and B, you're able to specialize in a way that you want to. I think, is that like a right analogy?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say there's no one direction that you can go. It's I don't know who, I think someone in our company said this. It's a career lattice where you can move up, you can move right, you can move down, and all of those things can be positive directions.
Yeah.
And I think I've taken that to heart. I think there is a lot to learn when you're not looking at, oh, my only goal is to manage more people.
Right.
If that's your barometer, then I think you might be going into leadership in the wrong, for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
Or just progressing because you're doing X thing. I think you want to challenge yourself and you want to craft and have the support to craft your own path.
Right. You said that you took that to heart yourself. Are you still a team lead?
So I'm not. I'm a software engineer and working on a whole new domain that I haven't experienced before. And
isn't that quite daunting?
Yeah. There's a lot of transferable skills.
Right.
Because if you think about, you're solving a problem in one domain, you're trying to build a system that has appropriate tests, that looks at how it integrates into other systems, that has to use other technologies within the company. Those are very transferable to another team.
Got it.
And I think this was really nice for me because it's an exciting new domain I don't know too much about. In the space of kind of natural language processing, which, I was bitten by the hype too. It's very exciting.
and scary, but exciting.
Exactly. And I think I wanted to be a part of that and really learn what that meant. What are the challenges with, no one ever thinks about, oh, how hard is it to host a model that is massive?
Yeah.
Right? How do you deploy this, and how can you ask services to call against it very often? How do you make sure that you're not wasting 20 hours training and then the model being kind of bad?
Did you have to apply to move to this team?
Yes. So did have to apply to join another team because you want to make sure that you're a good fit.
Yeah.
They want the managers in that area. It's big enough where maybe they've heard your name if you're lucky.
Yeah.
But might not be true. I think a big part of being successful in some of these larger companies is having a great internal network.
Yeah.
And so that also goes a long way, but you do have to prove yourself to a whole new different set of stakeholders on, yes, I know how to build a system. Yes, I know these things, and no, be honest about what you don't know about.
Yeah.
And be excited about learning it, right? Don't expect that you're going to go in at the knowing or feeling as confident as you may have in another domain.
This might be a dumb question. Who is teaching you about this new world that you're about to step into, or that you have stepped into? Are you teaching yourself? Is someone there to help you? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so actually when you join, especially, I guess I can only speak from my own experiences from my company, is there is like a mentorship structure to make sure that you're onboarded effectively, that you're taught the right things, that there's, again, that's something I think larger companies can afford to do, but all good teams do have, right? Is what is your onboarding curriculum to make sure that someone is successful there? And how do you make sure that they feel welcome to ask on any forum? And how can I ask someone how do I know the right people to ask?
Yeah.
And I think the company is set up well for that.
Oh, good.
I think that really what's been most beneficial is you have to, for yourself, I think I want to go in just asking all the questions, and I ask a lot of questions, and everyone there has been really helpful to answer.
I mean, it just seems just so amazingly collaborative, and I think a lot more than I expected for some reason. I guess maybe I was just picturing like the social network and everyone's just sitting there with the headphones and just like coding. But
that still happens.
It still happens, but it still seems like I thought it was just like that all day, every day, and that was the only thing that you were ever doing. Again, knowledge of this topic is clearly minimal, despite my knowing you for 7 years. I will stop picking your brain shortly, but I do have one more question for you. 2 more questions for you. What is your biggest piece of advice for someone who wants to go into software engineering?
I think my biggest piece of advice to someone entering the software industry is really being open to change. I think if you're not ready to move or adapt when things don't go your way, or when technologies are brand new and exciting, you're gonna not be as successful as you can be.
Yeah. Last question for you, Vinay. What's next?
So, I mean, I just started on this team about 3 months ago, and I'm moving to New York.
Yay! Best news ever.
So that's what's next, and we'll see what the new team, what the new domain has in store. Obviously, learning a lot. Don't know a lot now. Constantly, will never know everything, and can't wait to not know what's next.
That's a great way to fit it. Well, thank you so much for coming on and letting me pick your brain to oblivion. That's not the right saying.
Yeah, thanks again for having me on. And I just want to say, like, this is all my personal experience, and everything I had to say is personally just reflective of my own views. But
even still, it's all very useful information for those who are also looking to go into software engineering.
Of course.
And that's why I'm so glad you came on, because I think this is just such an amazing field that has so much growth in it. And I'm excited to see what you do.
Yeah, can't wait for what's next.
Love.